Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I am your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, breaking down the Manager of the Year award in the AL and the NL, and in particular, my very own official BBWAA ballot for the National League Manager of the Year. Who did I pick? Did I follow the consensus? Did I get it right, quote unquote? It's an opinion, but I'll break that down for you. Get into some preview of the Cy Young Award and where the Rockies have fared in the history of that award since 1993. Did you know that there were 4 Rockies who've received votes for the NL Cy Young Award? Well, I'll get into all of that and a little bit more. But the news that we ended up getting on Tuesday, 40-man roster deadline to protect players, to protect prospects ahead of next month's Rule 5 draft. Several talented guys kicking around in the minors speculated that perhaps these would be players that would get protected on the 40-man roster. 3 of the Rockies' top 30 prospects on MLB Pipeline's top 30 in the organization were up for the Rule 5 draft. Only one protected, that being Zac Veen. The one that we knew was going to go down ends up being the only one that the Rockies protect. This is certainly the first time they've protected only one player in recent memory that I can remember. It's very rare to protect only one player, and some of it is situational more than anything. Now, on one hand, you can look and say, well, this year's Rule 5 deadline corresponds with the 2020 MLB Draft, only 5 rounds. If you took a high school player, age 19 or younger in that draft, well, you have to protect them now. If it was going to be a college age player, 20 and up, well, that would have been players from that 2021 draft, which was the first one where there was only 20 rounds officially. So the Rockies had a couple options, but they are going to leave them out there exposed to possibly get selected in the Rule 5 draft. We haven't seen a Rockies player taken in the major league phase of the Rule 5 draft, I believe, since 2017. Julian Fernandez, a player who had Tommy John surgery, was selected by the Giants, spent the entire year on the 60-day IL, then was claimed by the Marlins, spent the next year on the 60-day IL, had 2 years of service time before he had even made his major league debut. There was some discussion that perhaps Eugenio Herrera, who was acquired in that Nick Mears trade from the Milwaukee Brewers, that perhaps he was one of those players that would have gotten protected. And I very much think that that would have been the case had he not had Tommy John surgery. That news coming down the pike just about last week. So could other teams have taken Herrera in the Rule 5 draft? Sure. They would have had to put him on the 60-day IL for the entire season, and then come off season, activate him on the 40-man roster, and he would have taken up a spot for 2 off seasons in hopes that maybe he could provide something in 2026. So the Rockies are taking a bit of a risk there, but I think it's a good and a sensible, calculated risk to leave him available out there. You also had Warming Bernabel that was out there that had previously been on the 40-man roster before he was removed. I think he's probably also safe to not get taken in the Rule 5 draft. But Zac Veen, the 9th overall selection in the 2020 MLB Draft at a Spruce Creek High School down in Florida, was rumored to go as high as number 2 that year in 2020 to the Orioles. Ended up falling to the Rockies and got his professional career started off with a bang, was the Northwest League MVP, was a postseason All-Star in 2022, his second full season as a professional. And skies definitely seem to be the limit. And I think there's very much still a lot of hope, still a lot of hype in a positive way around Zac Veen, especially after what he was able to do when healthy at AAA Albuquerque. Ended up finishing 2024 with 11 homers, 21 stolen bases in only 65 games. But those 65 games gives you some pause, as he has been a little bit unlucky with the injuries the past 2 seasons. Nevertheless, he was in 2022 in an Arizona Fall League Hitter of the Year, the Offensive Player of the Year, and has been struggling just a little bit to just keep himself healthy on the field. When you see him out there, when you see him play, he's very much electric. Not the center fielder that his speed might suggest, especially when you look at his stolen bases. That's been a topic of conversation since he's been drafted. Will he be a center fielder? But the simple fact that he has never been a center fielder for the Rockies in the minors tells you all you need to know about him playing in one of the corners. So with Brenton Doyle also in center field, there really is not much of a conversation to go regarding Zac Veen in center field, but he'll go back to big league camp once again this year in 2025 in spring training. We'll try to break camp. Is a left-handed bat that definitely has a lot more speed than power, but that power is still developing. A very young man, 23 years old. So still sky's the limit for Zac Veen. And now I think the Rockies have 9 outfielders on their 40-man roster. And no, there have not been any rule changes this year in MLB. They are no longer, they're not allowing 4 to 5 outfielders. It's still only 3. And you got the DH spot, but we all know that's where Chris Bryant is going to be stationed. Make sure you head over to justbaseball.com to not just read my National League Manager of the Year breakdown, but also an article that was just published today on Tuesday about the plan that the Rockies have going right now, because they floated several different ideas over the last few years. And the real plan, it does seem to be, is purely a homegrown situation, similar to what they had in 2007 with a bunch of homegrown guys that they were hoping something positive would happen. And I don't even think in 2007 they were hoping to make the postseason in all reality, because they were a team that was middle of the pack. They were playing around 500 before they caught fire at the end of the season to force a one-game playoff, game 163 against the Padres, and then tear off into 7 consecutive postseason wins, 21 out of 22 wins to get themselves into that World Series. But before that big run, they were a team that was around 500. They were a young squad with one leader at the helm, one leader who had seen better days. But he was a Hall of Fame caliber type player, multi-time All-Star, multi-time Silver Slugger Award winner, a lot of hardware in his home office. That's what Todd Helton brought to the 2007 Rockies. The 2025 Rockies, they don't have a Todd Helton, except they do. It's Chris Bryant. Now, you might not believe that Chris Bryant is going to bounce back and have somewhat of a 2007 type Todd Helton season, which if you go back and look at those numbers, they were not otherworldly for Todd Helton. I want to say he had 20 home runs, but he might have been under that. Yeah, 17 home runs, did have 91 RBI. He did bat 320 in 154 games played. So certainly one of the best post 30-year-old seasons that he had in his career. And, well, Chris Bryant still has that potential. Whether or not you buy into the fact that Chris Bryant is going to lead the Rockies to a 2007 type run is something wholly different. But the Rockies are building something right now, a homegrown squad that they are hoping can be like the 2007 Rockies, because they don't have a 2017-18 kind of club. They don't have any young superstars, multiple superstars like 2017 and 2018. They're not going out to acquire free agents like they did in 17 and 18. They're not going to be like the Kansas City Royals and have a 30-win turnaround. The most that they've ever had in a single season is 18 wins of an improvement. That's it. That's good. But 30 wins to turn things around, even if you were to win 20 more games, that gets you to 81 wins. And we have not seen in this new era of 3 wildcard clubs, we've not seen a team get into the postseason with anything less than 84 wins. So now we're talking 23 win turnaround, and you're only doing it with your homegrown players, your young players. And while you might squint and you might say, hey, if everybody plays their best, if we don't trade away some of these older guys on expiring contracts, we leave them to be veterans that can lead. If, it doesn't happen like that, folks. I'm sorry. It just doesn't happen that way. Every player does not have a career year. It doesn't happen. It's never happened in the history of baseball. And so that's not going to happen in 2025. But if there's going to be any chance that the Rockies can somehow catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle, enough to possibly scratch at the postseason and at least play relevant baseball into late June, early July, that only happens if Kris Bryant becomes even a shell of his former self. He has to be healthy. He has to stay on the field for 125 or more games, something we have yet to see him do. So check that article out over at justbaseball.com. Manager of the year, Stephen Vogt, 27 out of 30 first place votes. First-year manager, getting it done, and sets a record in the process. This was from Sarah Lang's. This is great stuff. This is great stuff. Joe Girardi had previously been the fastest person to go from a player, an active player, 2003, he was with the Cardinals, he finished up, to a manager of the year. 2006, he won the award with the Marlins. He had a sub 500 record, but that's how bad the Marlins were supposed to be in 2006. So in less than 3 years, he goes from active player to retired to manager of the year. Stephen Vogt, he breaks that record now. He finished his playing career October 5th, 2022, and just 397 days later, having no past managerial experience, Vogt was hired as Cleveland's manager and now is the AL Manager of the Year. Fastest to do it. Vogt was the only manager in the American League named on all 30 ballots. Aaron Boone, Mark Kotsay, each got one second-place vote, no third-place votes. Kotsay, an interesting second-place vote after everything he obviously has had to manage with, literally, figuratively, in Oakland, with that being their final year. Kind of a classy move to toss him a vote. I don't know about a number 2, but maybe a number 3. Okay. And that becomes part of the, I wouldn't say issue, that does become somewhat of a talking point with a lot of these ballots. It's easier to do for MVP voting because you're going 10 deep, 10 players deep. Easier for Cy Young Award because you've got 5 deep. But for Rookie of the Year and Manager, you only get 3. So a third-place vote isn't really worth that much. So you see people going out on a limb and tossing somebody a bone, if you will. Alex Cora received one of those bones. He received one third-place vote, despite not even having a record over 500. He was 81 and 81. Okay. My ballot. This was a pretty easy decision. Again, you can go over to justbaseball.com to read more about the details that went behind my decision to vote Pat Murphy, number 1, Mike Schilt, number 2, Carlos Mendoza, number 3, hit all 3. That was, and look, last year when I voted for the National League Rookie of the Award, I said this before, I knew the results were going to be Corbin Carroll, Kodai Senga, James Outman. And honestly, are there a lot of voters out there that know the result of a lot of these races? I think so. And I think that's why they might get a little creative with their ballot. And while I don't feel like I got creative with my ballot and giving Nolan Jones a second-place vote and Kodai Senga at number 3, I do stand by the simple fact that Nolan Jones was a lot better than James Outman. He didn't have as much playing time because he did not get the opportunity the first 2 months of the season. But for the final 4 months of the season, he was better than James Outman over 6 months of that season. Go back and look at those numbers. So this one, there's really no other way to dice it. To say, you know what, somebody deserves a little bit more recognition because I thought the 3 guys who I gave my votes to deserve the recognition in that order. Pat Murphy becoming the first Brewers manager to ever win the award, which I did not realize after I'd cast my vote after the final day of the regular season. Keep in mind, these votes are done before the playoffs start. Also didn't realize that Corbin Carroll was the first Diamondback to ever win the Rookie of the Year award. So 2 historic first-place votes I was a part of pretty cool. Like that, like being a part of history in that way. But Murphy, after 7 different times a Brewers manager finished in second place, Murphy getting it done. This is really his first time as a manager. He took over for Bud Black as an interim manager several years ago. What was that, 2015? But this was really his first gig. And he was the only NL manager to be on every single ballot and is the 10th manager of the year award winner to not play in the majors. Never played in the majors. You think about the fact that his roster, if you look at some of the projections, and this is one thing I talk about in the article at justbaseball.com, is wins and losses is really the only thing, in theory, we can gauge a successful manager by. And yet, no one actually casts a first place vote for the guy with the most wins or a second place vote for the person with the second most, etc. There was one voter who rather oddly gave Rob Thompson a first place vote and then had Torey Lovello, who finished in fourth. He gave him a second place vote, and Ollie Marmol, who also didn't make the postseason, gave him a third place vote. So Thompson appeared on only one ballot, and that guy gave him a first place vote. Dave Roberts did not get a first place vote, despite the fact he had 98 wins. And you can understand that because you're saying, yeah, but he had the best roster. Rob Thompson also had a really great roster too. It's one of the reasons why I decided to give my third place vote to Carlos Mendoza and not Rob Thompson, because I felt like Mendoza overcame a lot more than Rob Thompson. So it becomes less about how many wins a manager is able to accrue with his club in a single season, but more about how many more wins did you earn your team over the projections. That's really the one statistic you can look at in this subjective vote. You can't look at overturned calls, how many times you got ejected. Yeah, these are real statistics for managers, but they don't mean that much. They don't mean anything when you're trying to say who was the best manager. The Brewers had the 21st highest payroll in all of baseball. So his roster did not have the superstars that someone like the Phillies, even Atlanta, the Dodgers had on their roster. Christian Yelich shut down after game 101, done for the year. Devin Williams, their closer, missed the first 104 games of the season. They lost Corbin Burns in the offseason, had to trade him as he was approaching free agency. That's what good organizations do. When players are approaching free agency and you can't re-sign them, or frankly, you're not within your window of contention, you trade that player to get prospects. You trade 1 year for a guy in a season in which you don't need him because you're going to be bad for 12 seasons of young players that are still controlled because they don't have a lot of service time. Those are the kind of trades successful organizations make. So yes, Murphy is a product of this successful organization, but he also had to deal with a 20-year-old kid in Jackson Churio who is struggling. Go back and look at the numbers. His first 2 months was not good, but Murphy stuck with him. And at one point in the season, I think it was June 8th to the end of the year, he had nearly a 900 OPS. His batting average was up nearly 100 points from 208 to 306. Churio becoming the youngest player to ever hit 20 homers and 20 stolen bases in a season. So Pat Murphy definitely deserves this award. There's probably other details I'm even missing on top of that, but he was head and shoulders the obvious choice. 27 first place votes for him. Mike Shildt did get one first place vote, manager of the Padres. He's won everywhere he's gone. I've said this before. When talking about managers. First-year managers help change up the clubhouse. If you have a stale clubhouse and you have some stagnancy and your players, despite how good you might think they are, if they need a little something extra, changing the manager can really help you out. Mendoza, first-year manager. Shildt, first-year manager with the Padres. Murphy, first-year manager with the Brewers. Vogt, first-year manager with the Guardians. Quatraro, second-year manager with the Royals. There is evidence to suggest a new manager, fresh blood, will help turn things over in a really positive way. And Mike Shildt did that for a Padres organization that we've been waiting for them to be powerhouses. Yet 2 of the last 5 years, they made the postseason. That's it. Bob Melvin deciding to leave him and AJ Preller, they just couldn't make it work out despite an incredibly talented roster. And Mike Shildt gets the job done. 4 consecutive postseason appearances with him at the helm. Not going to count his first year when he took over partway through the season for Mike Matheny. 4 full seasons, 4 postseason appearances for Mike Shildt. Great job by him getting all-star selections, first-time all-star selections out of Jerks and Profar and Robert Suarez, 31 and 33 years old, respectively. Jackson Merrill, debuting at 20 years old after jumping AAA, making his major league debut in Korea. Mike Shildt got my number 2 vote. And then number 3, Carlos Mendoza. It came down to the final day of the regular season, really the day after, if you remember, because of the Hurricanes forcing Atlanta to have a doubleheader on Monday, the day after the regular season was supposed to end. And Mendoza winning that first game, Francisco Lindor with an MVP caliber season. Really didn't have any other MVPs. Got a breakout campaign from Mark Vientos, 27 home runs for him in about 111 games. Pete Alonso was fine, 33 homers in a free agent year. But a roster that, despite on paper, was worth more than $300 million, it really wasn't that good. You look at that rotation and you say, those guys are all pretty good. None were great. None are going to get a down ballot vote for NL Cy Young Award winner. So he had to cobble together this roster, and the turnaround, 65 and 38 the rest of the way, best record in baseball. Carlos Mendoza, number 3. If my ballot had gone deeper than that, if we were allowed to vote for more than 3, Rob Thompson would probably be my number 4, Dave Roberts, number 5, Snitker, 6. He had to overcome a lot with the loss of both Acuna Jr. and Spencer Strider. But Wednesday, it's going to be the Cy Young Award in the AL and NL. The last time a Rockies player earned a Cy Young Award vote, I know you know when. Kyle Freeland in 2018. It's only happened 4 times. The first was Marvin Freeman in 1994. He was actually tied for 4th with Doug Drabeck of the Pirates. Maddox won that year in 94 for the 3rd consecutive season. The first at that time, first player to ever do that. He was the unanimous winner. Ken Hill finished in 2nd, and Brett Saberhagen finished 3rd. Brett Saberhagen would be traded to the Rockies the next season to help get them to the postseason in 1995. Think about that world. We used to live in that world where a guy who finished 3rd in the National League Cy Young Award voting was traded to the Rockies the next year. Will that happen this year? Or rather this offseason or next year? No, because I think Paul Skeens is going to finish 3rd for NL Cy Young Award. But still, those were the days, huh? And tip of the cap to Marvin Freeman doing that in 94 at Mile High. No humidor. Only pitcher to ever get Cy Young Award votes without a humidor. Marvin Freeman, don't forget it. Jeff Francis in 2007 finished in 9th place. There were only 3 players on that ballot, so someone slipped him in, gave him a 3rd place vote. Jake Peavy did win unanimously that year in 2007. Everyone else received at least 2 votes on that ballot. No public record who cast these votes. So Jeff Francis had 1 vote. Everyone else had at least 2 votes or more. Ubaldo Jimenez, the best Cy Young caliber season in Rockies history back in 2010, finished in 3rd place, 2.88 ERA, went 19-8, started the All-Star game, 214 strikeouts, a franchise record at the time. Herman Marquez in 2018 would topple that with 230. But that year was Roy Halladay's year. If you remember, threw a perfect game during the regular season. Yes, he did throw a no-hitter in the playoffs, but that has nothing to do with these regular season awards. Halladay was the unanimous winner. Adam Wainwright received 28 second-place votes. Someone, believe it or not, actually put Wainwright 5th. Not doing your job there. Ubaldo did receive 4 second place votes, and he was on all 32 ballots. So that's going to be hard to beat. Not just a season in which every voter agreed that Ubaldo was a top 5 pitcher, but his numbers backed it up. 2.88 ERA. Impressive stuff. And then Kyle Freeland finished 4th place in 2018. Jacob deGrom, nearly unanimous, 29 first place votes. Somebody had to spoil it. Scherzer received the lone other first place vote. The rest of the 29 voters put Scherzer at second. 3rd place finisher Aaron Nola appeared on all 30 ballots. Freeland did appear on 28 ballots. He was excluded from the ballot of a LA Dodgers reporter. I know. And someone from Philadelphia. So that's where we're at, folks. Make sure you're following me over on Twitter at Patrick D. Lyons. Make sure you're following this page here on YouTube, because it's not just videos and live streams. It's a lot of other things too. Doing some posts, letting you know the news of the day. So make sure you're subscribing to the Rockies Insider channel. Again, at Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons, MLB. Appreciate you sticking around, giving me this bit of momentum. But as I like to say, momentum is only as good as my next podcast. So I'll talk to you then.